What has happened to Canada? Housing in Canada, at least in most of Canada, is impossibly expensive for young people. This is an emergency that has largely been ignored. Yes, you may see a headline about it here or there, but what are we doing to actually fix this? A few headlines or a few minor changes to some tax code is not going to put a dent in this problem. Recently, Canada's current leadership has been speaking about this cost of housing issue, but it is already so unbelievably out of control. If you live in the Greater Toronto Area and you make an average salary, you will, in all likelihood, never own a home if you don't already own one. The average home price in the Greater Toronto Area is $1 million. A study called Straddling the Gap showed that it will take you 27 years to pay a 20% down payment if you make an average salary. If you live outside the Greater Toronto Area, but still in Ontario, it'll only take you 22 years to save up for a home. The median salary in Ontario is $51,000, and the average price for a home is $920,000. The numbers are so far apart that it's almost laughable. So without financial support from your relatives, you will likely never own a home. In fact, 40% of first-time home buyers in Ontario received help from their parents, with the majority of that help being around $70,000. So if you live in Canada's largest province, you better have wealthy parents or find a way to make a significantly above average salary. Not only do you need to earn this high salary, but you need to find out how to do it relatively early on in life. Just to get your foot in the door and earn a home, you need to either have rich relatives or to be the exception to the rule earnings-wise, relatively early in life. Just to compare how difficult it is for people who are young to earn a home in Ontario, it only took 5 years for the boomers to pay off a 20% down payment. In Ontario, it takes 27 for young people. This is wrong. You should not have a country where you have almost no chance of achieving independence or financial freedom via home ownership. People should not have to pay off debt forever, which, by the way, is skyrocketing in addition to the housing market to over $2,000 nationally a month in a supposedly wealthy and developed country. If you have an average salary and have no destructive financial habits, it should not be impossible to own a home. The situation is even worse in Canada's west coast. In the province of British Columbia, the average home price of the entire province, not just Vancouver and surrounding area, but the entire province is just shy of $1 million at $967,000, but still. And the median salary in BC is actually a little less than Ontario at just $50,000 a year before taxes. Ontario and British Columbia combined have over 50% of the country's population. So right there, you have 50%, half the country's population, with homes that are out of reach for the average person. To get away from these ridiculously high home prices, many people in Ontario and British Columbia have been moving to Alberta, more specifically Calgary, which is a city of just 1.3 million people, located near the Rocky Mountains and Banff National Park. However, because of the influx of people in the city, the mayor of Calgary has declared a housing crisis of their own, as the price of homes in Calgary has skyrocketed, risen in the last year. Since 2023, in Calgary, Rent is up 40%, and the price of a single detached home has risen 37%. Looking outside Ontario, British Columbia, or Calgary, if you happen to be born in Quebec or grew up speaking French, you can somewhat reasonably afford to live in Quebec. It'll still take you 11 years, twice as long as it took the baby boomers to afford a 20% down payment, but at least this is somewhat attainable. And Quebec is Canada's second largest province. Quebec has just over 8 million people and makes up 20% of Canada's total population. Home prices in Quebec are below the national average, but the major hurdle for people living in Quebec is that Quebec is a French-speaking province. Anywhere outside of Montreal, you will have a hard time finding a job if you are not fluent in French. I suppose if you work entirely remotely, you could reasonably live in Quebec, but you will not be able to fully integrate into the community. But it will be difficult to integrate yourself into daily life. Montreal, the largest city in Quebec, could potentially be an option, as it's a largely bilingual city, but the average home price has risen 6% in the last year, just over $600,000. This is not as expensive as living in Ontario or British Columbia, but it's still out of reach for someone earning the average salary in Quebec. Also, Quebec as a province does not want Montreal to become a predominantly English-speaking city. The last premier of Quebec passed legislation to promote the speaking of the French language and restricting the use of English. There are currently some employers who are willing to speak English, but the majority of them prefer employees who speak French fluently. So again, Montreal is definitely an option, as you can get away with English in most cases, but it's definitely optimal if you speak French. So overall, learning French and moving to Quebec, whether it be Montreal or somewhere else in the province, is something you could do, but it would be extremely difficult. So outside from Ontario, British Columbia, Quebec, and Calgary, you now have 20% of Canada that you could move to from a population standpoint. Again, unless you can speak fluent French. Under 9 million out of Canada's population of 39 million live outside of Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia, and Calgary. So if you're a young person who does not have wealthy parents and who does not have a job that pays a significantly higher than average salary, you are basically forced to move to this 20% of Canada if you want a path to home ownership. So you will have towns and cities in the prairies and maritime provinces to choose from. These are nice towns for sure. The people are generally friendly, but there's still less to do, and the winters are generally a lot harsher than in places like Southern Ontario or British Columbia. Still, these towns and smaller cities can offer a decent life and path to home ownership. But as we are seeing in all of Southern Ontario, Calgary, and British Columbia, Gen Z and millennial Canadians are running out of places to flee in order to find good homes and an affordable quality of life and a realistic path to home ownership. These towns and smaller cities can offer a good life and a realistic path to home ownership. But as we are seeing throughout all of Southern Ontario, British Columbia, and now Calgary, Gen Z and millennial Canadians are running out of places to flee in order to find affordable homes and a good quality of life. On top of the life-altering event that is moving to another city, and Canadians watching this will know Canada is a massive country. Moving from Ontario to Alberta, for example, is almost the same as moving to an entirely different country. This distance will make it difficult to visit your friends and family regularly. It is not possible to drive home for a weekend between many Canadian cities, so in all likelihood, you will have to fly. So, adding to the challenges of starting a new life around new people, Canada is one of the most expensive countries on earth to fly nationally, which will make it harder to visit your hometown for a weekend to visit your friends and family. This chart ranks the cost of domestic travel. The cost per 60 miles, and as we mentioned, Canada is massive, the second largest country in the world by size. It is one of the most expensive countries on earth to fly domestically in. However, at the time this video is being recorded, flights are cheap. So hopefully flights stay this affordable, but I don't know. We will see. To further illustrate the magnitude of this problem, this housing problem in Canada, in America right now there is a housing crisis as well, but Canada's housing crisis is much, much worse, and it's not even really that close. The average Canadian earns about 25% less than the average American. As America's GDP per capita and purchasing power is 25% roughly higher than Canada's, and the average Canadian home is 25% more expensive than the price of the average American home. The typical home in Canada costs about $757,000, which converts to around $559,000 US, and the average American home costs $46,000 US. So the average American earns more money than the average Canadian and has homes that are more affordable, yet we are in a housing crisis. So if America has a housing crisis, what do they have in Canada? A super housing crisis. Can they even use the same phrase? The next brief part of this video is simply to highlight that young people in Canada have been misled about what the greatest issues in their lives are. In Canada, they have been told that the biggest problems in our world today are things like climate change, reducing their country's carbon footprint, or whatever social issue is popular at the given time. How is somebody working full-time while living in their parents' basement or living in a condo with two other roommates supposed to seriously believe that the biggest issue in their life is climate change? Come on. I'm not trying to make this video about social issues or about the environment, but my point is that Canada in recent years is more concerned with appearing to be a great place to live and less concerned with actually being one. Should Gen Z and millennial Canadians wait around for this to hopefully be fixed in the short to medium term? Is this worth the risk? Or should they just pack up and find another country to build their life? Thank you everyone for watching. Please comment your thoughts below.